I met a woman who turned out to be the mother of my wife's lover. How did this happen, and what did it all lead to? Well, let me tell you, my name is Ryan. My wife, Melanie, is 12 years younger than me and has the kind of model looks that turn heads wherever she goes. She's always been stunning, but it wasn't just her looks that caught me. It was her energy, her spirit. Something about her just made everything feel brighter. I met Melanie at my friend David's birthday party. She was standing by the window holding a glass of wine. The sunset hit her face just right. She looked like something from an old painting. Young, full of life, with a laugh that made people turn their heads. She was 25. I was 37. She said I seemed calm, steady. She liked that. I told her she reminded me of spring after a long winter. We started talking, and from that moment, I just wanted to spend every second with her. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about her. It wasn't love at first sight, not exactly, but there was a connection, something unspoken. I had to know more about her. I sent her flowers the next morning. She texted back, "No one's ever done that before." I started thinking of all sorts of things to do, just to make her smile. I started writing her little poems. Silly things, but they made her smile. I'd leave little notes, surprise her with random trips. One weekend, I showed up outside her apartment and said, "Pack a bag, no questions." We drove up the coast, ate seafood by candlelight, watched the stars from the hood of my car. There was a moment on a moonlit evening where everything felt perfect and I knew I couldn't let her slip away. Eventually, I proposed. I thought it was what we both wanted. But when I did, she looked at me with tears in her eyes and told me something that turned my world upside down. She told me something she'd been hiding. She had signed a modeling contract, out of state, a full year. It was painful, but I let her go. She needed to follow her dreams. We tried to make it work. FaceTime calls late at night, long texts in the mornings. I visited her when I could. Sometimes I felt like I was losing her. But then she'd send me a photo of us I didn't remember, with a note. "You make me feel safe." I held on to that. Even when doubt crept in, I held on. And then, after a year, she came back to town. When Melanie came back to town, I wanted to make it unforgettable. I wanted to show her just how much she meant to me. So I planned the most grand reunion I could think of. I rented a yacht, invited some of our closest friends, and had everything ready for a night that would feel like a dream. The city lights reflected off the water, the soft breeze, and the sound of the waves. We sailed under the stars, and as the champagne flowed, I could see the look of surprise and happiness on her face. It felt perfect, like the beginning of something even better than before. Her friends couldn't stop talking about it. They kept telling her, "Ryan's the kind of guy who belongs in fairy tales." They were right, in a way. I'd always been practical, calm, steady, but with Melanie, I felt like I could be a little wild, a little daring. And that night, I could see she appreciated it more than anything. We were married quietly, just the two of us and our closest family. Not long after, we had our son Lucas. He was everything to us. And then, when Lucas was only a year old, we found out we were expecting again. Our daughter, Daisy, was born soon after. I built a life that I thought was everything I ever wanted. I ran a consulting business, which meant I had to travel often. It was hard being away, but it was part of providing for our growing family. Melanie stayed busy too, working part-time as a freelance fashion designer. She'd still model from time to time, but she'd also gotten involved with a local nonprofit, an organization focused on the arts. She loved giving back to the community. Everything seemed perfect, like the pieces of a puzzle falling into place. But little did I know, something was changing, something I hadn't noticed yet. It was one of those quiet evenings when I was at home, a rare break from my usual travels. Daisy, who had just turned 5, walked up to me holding a piece of paper. Her little hands were gripping the edges of the drawing tightly, and her big brown eyes were wide with excitement. "Daddy, look," she said, her voice bright and innocent. I smiled and took the paper from her, thinking it would be another one of her colorful, scribbled family portraits. But what I saw made my heart drop into my stomach. The drawing was simple, childlike, of course, but the details were impossible to ignore. In the center, she had drawn me and Melanie, standing together. Next to me were Lucas and Daisy, but next to Melanie, there was another man. My hand shook as I held the drawing, staring at the unfamiliar face. The lines weren't perfect, but it was enough to make my chest tighten. I looked at her, my voice trembling slightly. "Who's this man, Daisy?" She didn't hesitate. "That's Jonathan," she said matter-of-factly, as if it was the most normal thing in the world. He comes over when you're not here. My world seemed to stop. My breath caught in my throat as I processed her words. Jonathan, I whispered, my mind racing. Who is he? Jonathan, she repeated, still so innocent, so unaware of the storm she was unknowingly stirring. He's funny. He brings snacks. He helps put us to bed when Mommy is busy. And sometimes he takes me and Lucas from school when you're not in town. My heart sank as I listened. I felt my legs go weak, the room spinning around me. Jonathan? Who was this man? Why had Melanie never mentioned him? I stared at the drawing, my thoughts a blur of confusion, anger, and fear. How had I missed this? Why had I not noticed that something was wrong in our relationship? How was it that the child, my innocent little girl, could see what I couldn't? Daisy kept talking, her words tumbling out as she shared more details about Jonathan. He played hide and seek with us, she said almost casually. Lucas and I would hide in different rooms, but Jonathan always hid with Mommy in your bedroom. When we got tired of hiding, we'd go look for them. And we always knocked on the door really loud like this, she demonstrated with her tiny hands mimicking the knocking motion. And when Jonathan opened the door, we'd find him and Mommy in there together. I couldn't breathe for a moment. I stared at her, my mind reeling. Always in the bedroom? Together? Daisy went on, oblivious to the gravity of what she was revealing. Sometimes we'd knock, and when Mommy opened the door, she'd smile and say, "It's just Jonathan," and we'd all laugh. I felt the ground shift beneath me, but I refused to let it knock me down. I was about to face this head on. Why hadn't I noticed? Why hadn't I realized that when I was away, there was someone else there, sharing those moments with her? The thought of it twisted my insides. It was so wrong. And yet somehow it had been happening right under my nose. The image of Melanie and this man, Jonathan, together in our bedroom, laughing, hiding, sharing those private spaces, I couldn't shake it. How long had this been going on? My mind was clouded with a storm of emotions. Disbelief, anger, a deep sense of betrayal. I had been so focused on my work, so wrapped up in my business trips, that I missed what was happening in the one place that should have been my sanctuary, our home, the place I had built for my family. How could I have been so blind? I looked down at Daisy, who was still smiling, still talking about how much fun she had with Jonathan. She had no idea the pain her words were causing me. She was just a little girl talking about her day, but I could hear the truth in her innocent voice. My heart pounded in my chest as I forced myself to stay calm, to not let the panic and fury take control. I needed answers. I knew what I had to do next. Find the truth, no matter what. Everything had been shattered, and I wasn't going to let her secrets remain buried, and I had to find out what it was, even if it tore me apart in the process. I didn't know who to turn to, so I did the only thing that made sense at the time. I hired a private detective. I knew it would be risky, but I couldn't just sit in this whirlwind of doubt and confusion any longer. I met him in a quiet cafe just a few blocks from my office. I told him everything I knew, about Daisy's drawing, about Jonathan, about my suspicions. It was like I was confessing to someone who wasn't emotionally involved, someone who could look at it all with fresh eyes. The detective nodded, making notes as I spoke. He seemed professional, detached, exactly what I needed. He assured me that he would start the investigation immediately. He told me it would take about a week. That week dragged on like the longest of my life. Each day was a slow burn. I played my part with precision, keeping my emotions in check. I was gathering the strength for the confrontation that was coming. I started watching stories on YouTube about wives' affairs, and I noticed one pattern. They all spoke about changes in their wives' behavior, subtle shifts that hinted at something more. They noticed their wives becoming more distant, more guarded. But with Melanie, it was different. There were no obvious signs, nothing that screamed affair. She was the same as always. She still laughed at my jokes, still took care of Lucas and Daisy, still gave me the same smile when I came home from a long day. In most of the YouTube stories, husbands found suspicious messages on their wives' phones and signs of someone else in their wives' lives. But I had checked Melanie's phone. Over and over, I never found anything. No hidden messages, no unexplained calls. I had no proof, no evidence. In most of the YouTube stories, there were also similar moments. She used to come home at a regular time, but now she stays out longer. Something's changed. But Melanie's work schedule was unpredictable. She could have shoots in the early morning, during the day, or late in the evening. I never knew when to expect her, and honestly, I had always trusted her when she said she was working. It was hard to pinpoint an exact time she was supposed to come home because her modeling gigs were all over the place. It seemed like an impossible thing to track. She'd been doing it for years, and I had learned to trust her explanations. But now, every time she walked through the door late at night, I felt my pulse quicken, the doubt creeping back in. Was she really at a shoot, or was she somewhere with him? It was like she was living two separate lives, and I couldn't see a single crack in the facade. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. There were no obvious signs, but the whispers and the nagging feeling in my gut wouldn't go away. My mind was racing, caught between the doubts and the trust I had in her. I couldn't deny the truth any longer, even though it tore me apart to accept it. But I wasn't going to let it break me. There was something I was missing. I had to find out the truth, no matter how much it hurt. The detective was gathering information. I drove to meet Detective Freddie. My mind was a whirlwind of doubt, fear, and confusion, but I needed answers. Freddie had been working on the case for a week, and he had told me that everything was coming together. When I walked into his office, I could see the calmness in his eyes, but it didn't comfort me. I was desperate for answers, and I needed them now. Freddie looked at me, his expression serious. "Ryan, I know everything you've been worried about," he said. "But before I give you the details, I need you to meet someone." I stared at him, confused. "What do you mean? Why?" "I'm here for answers about Melanie. I don't have time for anything else." He held up a hand, calm and reassuring. "I understand, but trust me on this. I've arranged something for you. You need to meet someone who can help you understand more about the situation. Her name is Amelia. She's a friend of mine." I felt a knot form in my stomach. Why did this feel so wrong? I wasn't in the mood to meet new people, especially not when my mind was consumed with my wife's betrayal or the possibility of it. "I don't get it, Freddie," I said, trying to keep my frustration in check. "Why now? Why am I supposed to meet her?" Freddie leaned back in his chair, giving me a look that told me he wasn't going to take no for an answer. "Because, Ryan, sometimes the truth comes from places you least expect. Trust me. Amelia is someone who can help you see things more clearly. You don't have to do anything, just meet her. It's part of the process, and I've arranged everything." I didn't have time to argue. I just wanted answers, and Freddie seemed certain that meeting this Amelia woman was somehow going to bring me closer to the truth. He handed me a piece of paper with the name of a cafe on it. "I've booked a table for you two. The place is called the Moonlit Garden. It's a nice, quiet spot. You'll meet her tonight at 6 o'clock. I didn't understand it, but I had no choice. "All right," I said, barely able to keep the frustration from my voice. "I'll be there." Freddie nodded and gave me a reassuring smile. "Good. Trust me, this will help. I'll be in touch after." As I left his office, my mind was racing. I had no idea what Freddie was thinking or why he wanted me to meet Amelia. I just hoped this meeting would bring me the answers I so desperately needed. I arrived at the Moonlit Garden a little early, the soft glow of the cafe's lanterns casting a romantic light over the small tables set against the backdrop of an elegant ivy-covered wall. I was still shaken from the morning's conversation with Freddie, but I had no choice but to sit down and wait. Soon, a woman entered. Her presence was striking, tall, with a sleek, well-kept look, and her movements were graceful. She looked like she belonged in a magazine cover, but there was an undeniable warmth in her eyes, a welcoming softness that softened her otherwise perfect appearance. She was indeed 3 years older than me, as Freddie had said, but she looked much younger. She smiled as she approached my table, her lips curving in a way that made me feel at ease immediately. "Ryan?" she asked, as though she already knew me, her voice light and melodic. I stood up to greet her, a little unsure of what to expect. "Yes, you must be Amelia," I said, offering a polite smile as I gestured for her to sit. "That's me," she replied, settling into the chair with an ease that suggested she was used to navigating situations like this. "I'm glad we could meet." I smiled back, but I could feel my unease slowly creeping back. I had no idea why I was here, but something in her eyes made me feel like she was here for a reason I still didn't understand. We started with the usual pleasantries. She asked about my work, my family, and I responded in kind. There was something incredibly easy about talking to her. Her presence was calm, almost soothing. She had the kind of warmth that made you feel like she genuinely cared about your words, even if you were talking about mundane things. But soon enough, her demeanor shifted just slightly, as if she had transitioned into something more serious, something that had been waiting to be said. "So, Freddie asked me to tell you something," she began, and I noticed the slight hesitation in her voice. "He didn't explain why it might interest you, but he's very persuasive. So, here I am." I couldn't help but feel a twinge of confusion. Why would Freddie want me to hear this? Why would he think this was relevant? Amelia continued, her gaze steady but her words edged with the kind of vulnerability that you didn't expect from someone who seemed so composed. I have a son, Jonathan. He's 20 now. She paused, her eyes momentarily softening with a kind of bittersweet nostalgia. His father, well, he left us when Jonathan was just a year old. I raised him on my own, poured everything I had into making sure he turned out okay. She leaned forward slightly, her fingers gently tapping the edge of her glass. But lately I've been concerned. Jonathan has started seeing someone, a woman, a married woman. She's older than him, much older. And, well, it's been bothering me. I didn't know how to handle it, so I reached out to Freddie a couple of weeks ago. He's been investigating, but, well, he didn't tell me what he found. He just said I should share this with you. I listened intently, but the mention of a married woman, someone older than him, sent a shock through my chest. I tried to keep my face neutral, but inside, my thoughts were racing. A married woman? It wasn't hard to imagine the terrible realization coming into focus, but I couldn't let myself believe it yet. It seemed too surreal, too impossible. Amelia continued, unaware of the storm brewing in my mind. Jonathan, and this woman. I don't know how to explain it, it just doesn't feel right. And the more I think about it, the more I wonder if maybe I've been too hard on him, but seeing him with someone so much older, someone who's married, I don't know what to think anymore. I felt the pieces falling into place, though I wished I could stop them. Jonathan, my wife. No, it couldn't be. But the evidence, the words, the uncomfortable connection, they were all pointing in the same direction. I tried to stay calm, but my mind was already spiraling. I needed more details. The pieces were slowly falling into place, but I needed something more concrete. Amelia, I asked, my voice a little more strained than I intended, what's the name of the woman Jonathan is seeing? Does she have any children? Amelia's eyes flickered with hesitation, as though the question took her by surprise. She sat back slightly in her chair, clearly trying to piece together the connection in her mind. After a moment of thought, she answered quietly, almost as if she was still trying to fully grasp the gravity of the situation herself. Her name is Melanie, she said slowly, her voice trailing off. I know it's Melanie because Jonathan speaks about her sometimes. She has 2 children, a son named Lucas and a daughter named Daisy. I felt the air leave my lungs as the words hit me like a punch to the stomach. Melanie, my wife. The name echoed in my mind, louder now than any other sound. It couldn't be. It couldn't be my wife. But Amelia had no reason to lie to me. Her confusion, her concern, it was all so real, so genuine. I sat there in stunned silence, trying to process everything she had just told me. I had never felt more helpless in my life. Lucas and Daisy, the names of my children, Melanie, my wife, had been involved with Amelia's son, Jonathan. My heart pounded in my chest as I struggled to come to terms with this. I looked at Amelia, but her face was filled with worry and concern. She had no idea what her words were doing to me. She was simply trying to share what she knew, to make sense of the situation that had left her equally confused and upset. I can't believe this, I snapped, my voice rising in anger as I slammed my fist onto the table. Amelia seemed to sense the shock in my expression and spoke softly, trying to offer some comfort, even though she didn't fully understand what this meant for me. Ryan, I'm sorry. I didn't know what this would mean for you. I didn't expect it to hit so close to home. I nodded absently, my mind reeling. I needed to get out of here, needed to breathe, but my body felt frozen in place. Thank you, Amelia, I managed to say. I think I need some time to process this. She gave me a sympathetic smile, her eyes soft with understanding. I understand, Ryan. I got into my car, but I didn't start the engine. I just sat there, staring blankly at the dashboard. My mind was a whirlwind, and I had no idea where to go. I couldn't go home, not now, not when everything was falling apart. I didn't even want to face Melanie. I wasn't ready to look her in the eye, not after everything I had learned. I felt lost, disconnected, and numb. About 5 minutes passed before I heard a knock on the window. I looked up and there stood Amelia. She had followed me outside, her face full of concern. How are you, Ryan? She asked softly, her eyes searching mine. I exhaled a long breath, my voice thick with emotion. It's all bad, I replied, barely able to keep the words together. It's just... bad? Amelia's expression shifted instantly to worry. She stepped closer, her voice more urgent now. You're not in a state to drive, Ryan. You can't be behind the wheel like this. I shook my head. She looked at me for a moment, then made a decision. Come with me. she said gently. "I'll drive you. You can stay at my place tonight. I have a guest room and you need to rest. Let me help." I didn't argue. I had no energy to fight it, and I was so angry at my wife that I didn't even know where to begin. Amelia led me to her car, and we drove in silence, the weight of the night pressing down on me. When we arrived at her house, it was quiet and calm. Amelia immediately made me feel at ease, offering a seat in her comfortable living room. She went to the bar, poured me a glass of whiskey, and handed it to me with a soft smile. "It might help just a little," she said, trying to offer some comfort in the midst of my chaos. I took the glass, the warmth of the liquor a small comfort in the storm of emotions swirling inside me. We continued to talk. Amelia pulled out her phone and started showing me pictures of her son Jonathan with the woman he had been seeing. She hesitated for a moment before handing me the phone, her voice soft as she said, "I hope for your sake this isn't your wife." I thought maybe Jonathan was seeing someone else. It was all right in front of me, Jonathan's picture, and there was my wife, standing beside him. I couldn't keep looking. I couldn't handle any more of it. Amelia, seeing my distress, didn't push me. She quietly took her leave, giving me the space I needed. I stumbled upstairs to the guest room she had prepared for me. I lay down on the bed, trying to shut out the thoughts that kept spinning in my mind. Sleep didn't come easily, but eventually exhaustion overcame me. I drifted off into a restless sleep, the night filled with fragments of broken thoughts. The next morning, the weight of everything hit me like a wave. I couldn't stay in this state any longer. I had to do something. I couldn't let it destroy me. I got in my car and drove straight to my lawyer's office. The air was still thick with tension, but there was no turning back now. I sat down with the lawyer, explained the situation, and we began the process of gathering the necessary documents. The word divorce hung in the air, heavy and final, but it was the only option left. I had no choice. As we started the paperwork, I felt a strange sense of clarity, like I was beginning to take control of something in my life again. It wasn't going to be easy, but it was necessary. When Melanie found out that I knew everything about her and her lover, she called me repeatedly, begging for my forgiveness, pleading for us to reunite once more. But deep down, I knew I could never forgive her. With the help of my lawyer, I began preparing for the most difficult and painful battle of my life. The truth I had uncovered about Melanie's infidelity was just the tip of the iceberg. As the weeks went on, we gathered evidence, carefully piecing everything together. My lawyer worked tirelessly, tracking every detail of Melanie's actions, and the truth came to light. The courtroom was filled with tension that day, a quiet hum of whispers as the proceedings began. The evidence was undeniable. Not only had Melanie been involved with her younger lover, but there was also the shocking revelation that for the past 3 months, she had been working in an entirely different industry. It wasn't just modeling, as she had led me to believe. No, she had been involved in explicit online content, performing with other men for a private audience behind closed doors. These were not things I had ever imagined. My mind could hardly wrap itself around the idea of the woman I loved and married involved in something so profoundly different from the life I thought we shared. The evidence was thorough. We had receipts, contracts, even video footage. All of this came to light with the help of my detective, for which I was truly grateful. Every detail was laid out in front of the judge. It was clear that Melanie had not only betrayed me, but she had done so in ways that crossed a line I could never have imagined. As the judge deliberated, I kept my focus on the one thing that mattered most to me, my children. I knew that I had to fight for their future, to protect them from the chaos and hurt Melanie had brought into our lives. I had no intention of letting them live in a situation where their mother's actions had created such a toxic environment. The ruling was made. I was granted full custody of Lucas and Daisy. It wasn't an easy victory, but it was the right one for my children. The judge acknowledged the severity of Melanie's actions and the harm they could cause. I was awarded the house as well, a place where my children could grow up in peace, away from the turmoil their mother had created. As I walked out of the courtroom that day, I didn't feel victorious. I felt exhausted, emotionally drained. It wasn't the kind of win I ever wanted, but it was necessary. My life, our lives, had been turned upside down by the woman I had trusted more than anyone. Now, I had to rebuild, and that meant taking full responsibility for my children's well-being. After the court's verdict, I felt a sense of relief, but there was something more I wanted to do. I wanted to share the results with Amelia. She had been my pillar of support throughout this entire ordeal, always there with kind words and helpful advice. Over the past few weeks, we had met several times, and each time, she offered insights and guidance that helped me regain my strength and focus. 2 weeks after the court decision, I invited her over to my home. I wanted her to see the house, the place where I had fought to give my children stability. The moment she stepped in, my children welcomed her with open arms. They connected with her immediately, and I could see how effortlessly she interacted with them. Amelia had a way with people, especially with children. She spoke to them with respect, listened to their stories, and made them feel comfortable. It was as if she had always been a part of our lives. That evening, we celebrated. We celebrated that the court's decision had worked in our favor and, most importantly, in the favor of the children. My kids deserved to grow up in a safe and loving environment, and now, thanks to the judge's ruling, they would. As we sat together, Amelia shared something I hadn't known. When Jonathan found out what Melanie was involved in, he immediately broke things off with her, she said, her voice steady. He was disgusted by what she was doing. He's dating someone new now, a classmate from college. He's moving on. Hearing this lifted a small weight off my chest, and I was glad that I wasn't the only one seeking justice for Melanie's behavior. As we spent more time together, I couldn't help but feel that something more was growing between Amelia and me. Over the weeks, I realized that my feelings for her were deepening. One evening, I told her honestly, "I think I'm starting to have feelings for you, Amelia." To my relief, she didn't hesitate. "I feel the same way, Ryan," she replied, her smile warm. "I've grown fond of you too." Our connection was undeniable, and as time passed, we continued to meet and grow closer. 6 months later, I asked Amelia to marry me, and she said yes. It felt like the right step, not just for me, but for my children as well. They were happy with her, and I knew she would be a wonderful partner and stepmother. As for Melanie, I didn't feel the need to explain myself to anyone about the past anymore. I didn't blame Jonathan for anything, because the blame for everything fell squarely on Melanie. She was the one who had broken her vows. She was the one who had betrayed me. She had been the one to bring our marriage to its knees, and I wasn't going to allow her to manipulate anyone else with her lies. I made sure she would feel the consequences of her actions. Her life would never be the same again, and she had no one to blame but herself. By taking away the financial support she had come to rely on, by revealing her true nature to her friends and family, I made it impossible for her to continue pretending to be the woman she wasn't. Eventually, she had no choice but to move to a different state where she wasn't known. This small immigration from state to state meant that she could no longer be a part of her children's lives the way she had hoped. This was the main part of my revenge and her punishment for what she had done. I understood that, for my kids, the less they saw of her, the better. She had nothing good to offer them. The only advice I gave Jonathan, and I made it clear, was to never get involved with a married woman again. But at the same time, I knew one truth that stood clear in my heart. A strong love and bond can't be destroyed, not if the love between a husband and wife is true and unwavering. If Melanie had truly loved me, if our connection had been as solid as I thought, none of this would have ever happened. The strength of love should always be enough to hold people together, to prevent them from falling apart. So as I looked ahead with Amelia by my side, I realized that despite the scars left by Melanie, I had found a way forward. A new chapter, with new lessons, new love, and most importantly, a future for my children that was free from the pain of the past.